Where you are in the world, thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. I'm your host, Marty Bennett, and today on the Roundup for Wednesday, February 21st, we're going to be answering 3 questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last few days. And as we do each week on the Roundup, we take the stories and questions that we go into here on the Wednesday Roundup from our newsletter that comes out on Monday mornings. And for those of you who aren't familiar, we have the smieconsulting.org/subscribe website. There you can, on that site, you can subscribe, scroll down a bit to all the SMIE News Fit to Share link and hit that subscribe button, fill in your details, and you'll get the email version of our newsletter in your inbox every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. We also, for your benefit today, those that are new to the Roundup, I'll put the links to not only the sign-up page on the website, but also the email version of the newsletter. We also have a LinkedIn version of the newsletter for those of you who like that way to get your international education news, and I'll drop that link in as well. And that will give you, between the two versions, the email and the LinkedIn version, we have over 1,600 subscribers on that particular newsletter versions. So we're really pleased that our reach is growing into the international education profession to get this content. The newsletter itself has anywhere from 25 to 30 stories each week for covering social media impacts, and that can be anything from AI, upcoming webinars, social media news, how those 2 and 3 different things come together in international education and impact what we do. Some great blog content that comes out regularly. We also provide a roundup of the global events that are happening in other major destination markets like the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK, and the United States, obviously. So we can do certainly that to help you understand what's happening in the wider world, and can get you into the kinds of detail that you need to get perspective on what's going on in the wider world, as well as potential solutions to help you figure out what's best for your institution. Now, we're going to talk today about some of the more important issues of the day, and that some of that is the changing realities of what we're facing in international education, and that has to do quite a bit with information related to what subjects students are coming to study. And for those that aren't aware, the print edition and the online edition just came out today for those of you who are open doors folks at your institutions in terms of the main point people, and we can share that from the latest news that we already knew this, but STEM is increasingly what students are looking to get into more than anything else in the United States. There's been a couple different analyses on that recently, one by my good friend Peter Vermeulen at University of North Texas, that shares that upwards of almost 3/4 of all international students currently in the United States are here as STEM students. So STEM is the topic, and that's the changing reality, the reality of most of our institutions these days. Now, there's the article that I'm going to be referencing today is from our good friends at intl. They've got a great piece this past week that shares the changing international enrollment realities that focuses a lot on STEM and the impact that has. Why is it, for those that aren't aware, STEM OPT, optional practical training, is available to international students who are in STEM fields of study, and they can pursue that up to 3 years of work permission per degree level. So bachelor's, master's, and PhD, they can do 3 years of work in their field. So they have the opportunity to have more potential work experience because of their program than anywhere else in the world. So that level of commitment to to work for students. And why do we do that in the United States? This was actually started back right at the end of the Bush administration of their time to provide opportunities for international students to work in fields that were high demand here in the United States. So STEM fields have certainly done that, and there is a great opportunity here for U.S. institutions that can capitalize on this opportunity to get their programs in front of prospective students and really make a difference in terms of focusing future students' attentions on your best programs. So this is something that I always make an effort to share with my colleagues is how are you distinguishing your programs, particularly your STEM programs, to future students, international students, when you're traveling abroad, when you're positioning that information on your website, because those are the things that matter. These are the kinds of decisions in terms of job markets, in terms of the length of work that they can do. We've seen the OPT numbers in the United States grow dramatically in the last 2 or 3 years post-COVID. We now see that in 2022, there were over 117,300 new OPT authorizations, 64,000 new STEM OPT authorizations in that time. That's up 87% and 307% respectively over the last decade. So the number of STEM fields that qualify has also grown, and that's a good thing because it opens up the door to future students who might be looking at other fields that might not have been STEM in the past that are now. And that's something that always is something you want to promote. We've seen stories like this over the last decade of business colleges that are trying to make all their MBA programs STEM now. And as a result of that, they are in the position to better attract better quality students and a larger number of students than they might have been able to attract previously just for a vanilla MBA. But now if it's a STEM MBA, that really opens up doors in terms of work experience, makes them much more, their graduates, international graduates, much more attractive to future employers that know that they can have them potentially for 3 years of work before they have to make a decision on whether to move them over to H-1B. So there are some real positives about STEM in the United States. We have had a STEM deficit in terms of college graduates, U.S. college graduates in the country for at least 25, 30 years. And international students have been the ones that are probably the most engaged in wanting to come here to study STEM because of their math and science backgrounds in their home countries, where it's very much rote learning, memorization, repeating, and a very head smart, brain smart. And those are the kind of skill sets that analytical minds that really do well in STEM programs. Then we don't really have as strong of a culture of that here in the United States. So as a result, it's a little bit harder for those because U.S. students aren't, if they don't already have a passion for science and math and in grade school into high school, pursuing a math and science degree for many U.S. students is not a top priority. It's they want to go business, they want to go fine arts, they want to go hospitality, they want to do something that's more fun, more potentially liberal arts based. And nothing wrong with liberal arts. I'm a liberal arts graduate, bachelor's and master's degree. I'm not a STEM guy, but I see the value in it. And I see the value in it as an institutional representative that has the responsibility for bringing in students from abroad. So one of the things, real easy thing that you can do to help position your institution and your majors appropriately is how you display them, particularly when you're doing in-person events. This is something that I've been doing for the last 3 years with UNLV. At my institution, when we were designing the first international specific piece, there hadn't been one previously. When we were designing that, I knew I wasn't going to be able to have 3 or 4 brochures. I wanted to have one simple thing that had as much of what students needed to know: costs, deadlines, programs, scholarships, key selling points, all of that in one place. So if for me, knowing that STEM is important, and being in the industry for 30 years, I figured that out a while ago. But STEM is a big selling point for U.S. institutions because of that OPT, that STEM OPT, extra 2 years of work permission that they can get. So for me, the reality is I needed to position all of our STEM programs and in an easily identifiable way on our main international flyer. We have over 36 STEM bachelor's, master's, and doctoral programs. And the way we do that, our school colors are scarlet and gray. We're the scarlet and gray of the west of the Mississippi for my Ohio State colleagues. So for us, on our international flyer, we highlight in gray all of those STEM programs. So when students go, oh, what do these grade majors mean? Okay, well, see the key in the corner here? That means they're STEM. Do you know what that is? Oh yeah, that means I can do two extra years of work. And we talk about that as a real value add to them coming to our institution. And this is part of the perspective piece I talk about all the time here. It's not just about the value of your institution and the highlights and selling points of your school, your university, and your city. It's about selling your country as well, as why is the U.S. the number one in the world for international students in terms of total numbers, in terms of quality, in terms of rankings, all of these things that have traditionally attracted overseas students to the United States. The experience, the intercultural nature of all of our campuses, the campus life itself, which is very unique to the United States in terms of how much we focus on this. And that's something that I really feel that not enough institutions really get that, in terms of seeing the bigger picture and being able to talk not just about their own institution, but about the value of coming to the United States. Because oftentimes the students that you're interacting with, particularly overseas at fairs that you might be emailing or chatting with online, they are looking at multiple countries to potentially attend higher education opportunities for. So what are you doing to help convince them that your country, not just your university, your country has a lot of opportunities for them, advantages for them if they choose to come to the United States. And then you can add your institutional benefits on top of that. And being able to articulate that well in person to students at fairs means all the difference in terms of your ability to make that connection, but also whet that student's appetite a little bit more for what your institution has to offer. So great article by INTED and their folks there. The Open Doors data that just came out, that was kind of the book version, online version of what they presented in November in much more detail. It just came out today. And then in the INTED article, they reference my colleague Peter Vermeulen at UNT and some of his work that he documented that up to 74% of international students in the United States are currently studying in STEM fields. So that's huge. That's a huge number. So how much of how you promote your institution, promote your programs, should also reflect that need. Obviously, your non-STEM programs will get a little offended if you don't mention them, but knowing your audience is part of the challenge here. Is know that the students, when you're interacting in large groups at fairs, mentioning that STEM OPT is going to pique the interest, at least, of most students. That extra 2 years of work permission can really make a difference. So that's enough for question one for the day. The second question is, why can you not ignore India's impact on international education? And this is a foundational question to how we function today in international ed in the United States and in the world. For those that have been living under a rock for the last 6 months or longer, you may have missed the news that India is now certainly not in the Open Doors numbers that came out in November, because that's year-old data, but certainly in the SEVIS by the numbers data, which is real-time international students in the United States. They have surpassed China as the #1 sender to the U.S. for post-secondary education. And as a result of that, India is their population is growing much more rapidly than China. China's is actually decreasing. India has always been a grad-heavy market, but there's now also an undergrad market that's growing, an undergrad market that is now the second largest sender for undergraduate studies for international students in the United States after China. But for graduate students, India is double the nearest competitor for numbers in terms of international graduate students in the United States. By far the #1, but now #1 overall as well. So that's India's numbers in real time today, how they are impacting what's going on our campuses in the United States. But beyond that, and I refer to an Economic Times article in India that shares that over 59,000 Indians got U.S. citizenship in 2023. Now, they represent now 6.7% of all new citizens in the United States this past year. Former Mexican nationals were number one at 12.7%. India was number two at 6.7%. That's out of the total number of new U.S. citizens sworn in as citizens this past year. Indians were number two on that list. And why are they number two? Why are they coming to the United States? They're coming because that we represent the American dream for them, the Indian American dream of coming to the United States to make a better life for themselves and their families. Some of them, many of them have come initially on H-1Bs, have gone through that process, that very maybe straight over from India to begin work, and then eventually transition into to permanent resident applicants and then eventually citizens. That process can take 20 years altogether of H-1B, permanent residency, and then eventually citizenship. There are international students that come from India as bachelor's degrees or master's degree students that get that first job, maybe STEM OPT jobs that gives them 3 years of work after they're done, and then go into H-1B process for 6 years and then permanent residency for another 6 years and then so on. So there are so many Indians that are in the pipeline. We already know that they're number one in the United States for students. They're number one for OPT. They're number one for H-1B. They are huge numbers in terms of from student track to employer track to residency track to citizenship. Indians are at the top of the food chain, other than Mexico, for that citizenship track, but all the way through the process, from students to OPT to permanent H-1B to permanent residence. All of that time, Indians have been, over the last 20 years, have increasingly been dominating those areas because they see America as their dream for their families, improving the quality of life for their families, the financial conditions for their families. It is all down to how much they value what the United States can offer them. Now, not all of the Indians in the United States come as students or come as employees. Some come as economic migrants, for lack of a better word, that we have seen floods of into the United States, usually over the southern border over the last 3, 4, 5 years. But we're seeing now that they are coming in record numbers. And that isn't a trend that's going to slow anytime soon. When you see what's happened north of the border in Canada, India has been the number one destination or source market for them too. But there was a big diplomatic row last summer between India and Canada. Canada has also now implemented 2 extra requirements new requirements that are going to limit the number of Indians that are going to come beyond the political row that had already depressed visas, student study permits awarded to Indians coming for Canadian study. There have been the requirement to raise the minimum amount of funding that they had to share from $10,000 to $20,000 per year. They've also included or put an end to the public-private partnerships that have led to postgraduate work permits for these vocational colleges that have been a primary source of the challenges in a lot of the provinces, but particularly Ontario, Quebec especially, where there's some real bad fraud issues. There's been some significant challenges with housing in these provinces that have hired a lot of these PPP students that are admitted through public colleges, but then placed at private colleges, for-profit private colleges that lead to quicker work permits. Those are all things that we really don't have in the United States. We don't have that system for our what we call our vocational colleges here for M visas and such. So that is a pathway that has been very attractive because they only had to show $10,000. Now they have to show $20,000, and the benefit of that postgraduate work permit is going away after August this year. Any new students starting at PPPs in Canada after August will no longer be able to take advantage of post-study work. So their numbers are going to crater after the August. Many of those universities, we also found out this week, have those colleges, I should say, have changed their intakes from September, when new students wouldn't have been eligible for PPP and postgraduate work permits, to August, so that they could get in under the wire and be able to still qualify for those work permits after they finish their studies. So again, that's the perspective piece we're talking about. In Canada, they're gonna lose their number one market. Their numbers are going to crater in the next year, more so than they have already. So the question will be, are there opportunities now for U.S. institutions to potentially even ratchet up the volume more and attract a larger share of that Indian market? And I think there are, because you look at what's happening in the UK with the dependent study ban, that no longer can master's degrees or lower candidates coming to the UK bring family members with them because of net migration concerns there. So that becomes less attractive. India was the number one destination or source country for those dependent work study dependent students that would dependents of students that would come with that are no longer be able to come, and so that country will become less attractive for Indians. We see in Australia, they are also heavily impacted by changes in their government migration policies that are going after some of the lower level vocational colleges there that also attract large numbers of Indians for purposes of economic migration, kind of what they call the two-step migration, short-term study at a vocational college and then into the workforce. Those colleges are also going to be real threats, and we've already seen numbers start cratering there in terms of visas approved. So there are opportunities, and that's why you can't ignore India at your own peril. There are so many opportunities that for institutions in the United States to really leverage their position as a destination, and not just the institutional destination, but the country as a destination. And when you put those two together, you have a winning combination to get in front of the right students and the right parents. So that's all for question 2. And let's switch gears to the final topic of the day, which relates to a lot of the same issues we're talking about and have been talking about for a number of weeks and months, and that revolves around housing. The housing crisis. And this is, if you followed the news, if you subscribed to the newsletter, you certainly have seen this. ISIF Monitor just released a new report this past week where they looked at the student housing crunch in Europe, in Australia, in Canada. And what they found is it hasn't gotten any better until the numbers start dropping dramatically, and it looks like they're going to in all of those areas. The housing crunch is a real challenge. We had institutions 2 years ago during the pandemic that were in the UK that were telling students, if you haven't found housing, even if you've gotten your visa, don't come if you haven't found housing, because if you don't have a place to stay, it's not going to be worth your time coming. That was those were messages that were sent out to international students who had been admitted, who might have gotten their visas already. Don't come if you don't have a place to stay, because the housing shortage is so bad. There are places in Canada where there are students that were sitting for a 2-bedroom apartment that's made for maybe 4 people that had 10 people in it. That's just not a healthy living condition, because there wasn't anything else. And in some of the smaller provinces, less populated provinces, it's even more acute in terms of the housing challenges, just because they don't have the housing stock to support the huge numbers that were coming. Cape Breton University is the kind of the poster child for that. They've reduced their enrollments because they don't have the housing. And those enrollments that they're reducing are almost exclusively going to be international students, which were already about 70% of the population. So we see some real opportunities here in the United States that don't exist in these other countries, because and here's the trick. And when I talk about perspective again, this is the selling point that most people don't understand outside the United States about why the U.S. colleges and universities not only cost so much, but are better environments for students. And most of the rest of the world, when you go to university, it's a place that you physically travel to each day. You're commuting from apartments or buses to get somewhere in a bigger city to get to a campus, to take your classes. And then you might study for an hour in a library, but you're going home after that. There isn't a campus life culture in most of the rest of the world outside the United States. And part of that reason is housing. In the United States, we don't have largely the housing issues that you have in the rest of the world, because we, for our campuses, many that support international students, have had a philosophy over the years to build on-campus housing. And as a result, there's less of a strain on the local communities to provide the housing stock, when you can rely on the campuses to have housing for the students that are coming that need it. And that reduces the impact on the larger community when you have your own facilities on campus. So what we need to do now is really look at that for international students that are coming to the United States and figure out what makes sense for us in terms of how we position ourselves. We can look at what we have available, and that's something, particularly if you're at a small school in a rural or suburban community, but you have housing. That's a real selling point. And if you can talk about that as an advantage for your institution, when they're looking at other schools in other countries that are beset with housing problems, if you can use that as leverage to help make your institution much more attractive, then you are doing your job. You're looking at the larger picture. And this is, again, another reason why a lot of schools miss an opportunity here when they're recruiting. Talk up your housing. Talk about the community that you have on campus, and talk about what that looks like for your international students, and have them talk about the on-campus experience as a highlight of their time, because future students don't know what they don't know. And they don't know, unless they've had family or friends study in the United States, they don't know about that campus culture. So really, it's a lot of what we're talking about today is understanding opportunities to promote not only your institution, but your country as a destination for international students. And all of these put together hopefully give you some perspective today on where you can be leveraging your institution for the future and its benefits across the board. So we hope that you enjoyed this session today. I certainly did. There's a lot of great content in here in terms of themes that you can use, take back to your marketing and communications teams, and position your institution better for the next cycle of students coming through. So until next time, we wish you all the best, and we'll chat with you soon. Cheers.